happens.
Right. All right. What's up? What's up? Welcome to the Blockument. Crypto education through everyday conversations.
Yes, sir.
My name's Nate Talbot. I'm the executive director of Detroit Blockchain Center. And to my right is the fantabulous
Ashlee Rose. I am your everyday gal. I'm a mother, an online reseller, and I am here trying to figure out what all of this crypto blockchain stuff is all about.
Yeah, you keep saying trying to figure it out, but I think you're quickly becoming one of the top echelons of crypto blockchain information.
What a compliment. I will take it.
Yeah, well, good. So, give us Ashlee's moment here. We're looking at our mempool moment.
Yeah.
Where are we at right now in the mempool?
Okay, we are at block height number 790,749. That is a block size of 1.76 megabytes. That included 4,246 transactions. All the fees and subsidies included in that were paid out are $187,684 US dollars. That's 6.97 Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And the winner of all of that was Foundry USA.
Nice. So I don't remember how many blocks ago. This was last week, though, I believe. A monumental event happened in the Bitcoin blockchain. Are you familiar with it? What happened?
Are you talking about the, oh boy.
Has to do with the fees.
I'm drawing a blank on the word. It starts with a C. Is that, nope, I've drawn a blank.
So what happened was, for the first time ever, the total fees, you just gave us the total subsidy and fees, right? Mm-hmm. So for this past block that you just mentioned, mm-hmm. The total fees was $19,379, right? Mm-hmm. But the subsidy, which is 1 Bitcoin, and 1 Bitcoin today is at around $26,900, right? Mm-hmm. For the first time ever, we had fees that paid more than the subsidy. Mm-hmm. Usually the miner gets the subsidy that right now 6.25 Bitcoin, mm-hmm. right? And that's really where bulk of their money comes from. They don't make a lot from the fees. Like you just mentioned, they made $19,000 in fees, mm-hmm. versus 27,000 times 6, right? Mm-hmm. For the first time, they earned more in fees than they made in Bitcoin.
Oh.
From the Bitcoin subsidy. That's huge. There's a long-term debate going on around every 4 years we have the halving, right? So the subsidy drops in half.
Yeah. So
next year, around next April, the subsidy will go from 6.25 Bitcoin to 3.175 or whatever, mm-hmm. half would be at, right? So eventually, they're not going to make any fees. In about 100-something years, there's not going to be any fees. There's going to be fees. There's not going to be any subsidy.
Right.
All there will be is fees. So the question is, are they going to be making enough where it's worth their while?
Yeah.
So with all of there's a lot of things happening. I'll stay agnostic on my opinion on these things, but between like ordinals and BRC-20s.
That's the word I was thinking. I don't know why I thought it was a C.
There's a lot of non-monetary base activity happening on the Bitcoin blockchain these days around this block height. And regardless of how you feel about it, the one thing that's universally true is it drives up fees, and the miners should be loving it.
Yeah.
So, it answers, will there ever be enough fee activity to sustain the Bitcoin blockchain? And this gives you a snapshot into what the could-be's could be. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty monumental. It was the first time it ever happened in 700, almost 800,000 blocks now.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. But that is not what we're talking about today, although it does tie to it. What we're talking about today is, what is game theory?
Yes.
It's better than Jeopardy. It's better than Monopoly. It's game theory. So start us off. What is game theory?
Oh boy. Let's see here. Game theory, from what I know, is it's basically like strategies on making next steps. And like, well, I always learn it from war. So in like a two-party or like I don't know, war games. So it's the decisions that you make strategically.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair assessment of it all. Right. It is how do individuals or how do entities act in strategic situations, right? There are some assumptions you make with it, but it's not just sort of where you act in strategic situations, but where you also have to take into consideration the actions of others, right? And that's what game theory sort of is. And to quickly throw relevance into why we're talking about this on a show that's about blockchain, cryptos, and this entire space, right? It's because game theory is one of the largest drivers of how blockchains work, right? It's an economic incentive. We were just talking about the fees, right, and the subsidy fees. And so part of the game theory of Bitcoin and most proof of work systems is going to be how do we economically align, how do we incentivize miners to act and play by the rules and make them feel like it's more economically favorable for them to do that than it is to cheat. And proof of stake systems are set up with the exact same question in mind. How do we align validators and participants to play by the rules of the network and incentivize them to do that where it's more favorable for them than it is to cheat? And now how you go about that approach, that's the whole game. Right? So it's not actually a game where you have, players and rolling dice or something, but it is a game because you're trying to make decisions based on other participants. Sometimes you know the other participants. Sometimes you don't know the other participants. Sometimes the other participants all want to play the game with you. Sometimes the other participants only want to destroy you. Sometimes they just care about themselves. And so how do you figure these things out? And that's the basics. If you're running a permissionless blockchain that we've talked about before, right? Where anybody can enter and leave and there is no centralized party to sort of lay out the rules, then game theory kicks in huge. And this isn't a blockchain only thing. Game theory's been around for decades. There's I'm so young, so I'm hesitant to call this an old movie, but there's a relatively new movie in my life span called A Beautiful Mind about John Nash, right? It has, I think, Russell Crowe in it. So John Nash is considered like the father of game theory. So you can go watch the movie and get an idea of sort of the history of game theory. This was like back in the 60s, I think, maybe a little earlier, 50s, during the Cold War sort of times when John Nash was doing his thing, coming up with the game theory. I would say, I don't want to make this a math conversation, and this isn't going to be a math thing. Game theory is a strong economics and math sort of driven thing, but there's plenty of areas where you talk about game theory and you don't have to really get into the math at all. But yeah, I would say he discovered game theory more than he invented game theory, because game theory was in play before he formalized it. So let's talk about it. What is game theory and whatnot? So I think you had it pretty much right. It is how people act, how people strategize, but in the consideration of other players, right? So let's get a couple definitions out of the way, which I think we just did. What is a game? A game is just looking at a specific model and sort of figuring out how the participants will play out. All right. You got players. What are players in the game? And those are just all of the people participating in it. But there is usually an assumption made, to my understanding. I'm not a game theory expert. Again, it's a very deep field, just like I'm not a computer science expert.
Yeah.
Or do I give financial advice? So if we talk about systems and their game theory design, we're not necessarily endorsing or saying, well, because the game theory seems good here, you should go buy some.
They're merely observations.
Right. We're just two people chopping it up, talking on your phone or whatever. So yeah, the thing about players you have to keep in mind is when modeling game theory, you're typically thinking about a rational player, right? And a rational player is somebody who is acting as you would expect them to act.
Okay.
All right. It doesn't mean they're necessarily, that could be, you might expect them to act in a self-interested way. Mm-hmm. You might expect them to act in a very altruistic manner, right? If I'm talking to a bunch of C-level execs from the top corporations around the world, you would probably expect they're thinking in a very self-interested way.
Yes.
Right? They're thinking on behalf of their stockholders. Versus, theoretically, if you're talking to a more altruistic organization like the UN or some kind of church governing body, whatever, who has the morals of the people in mind, you would think they would not be self-interested. They would be more in what's best for the community. Theoretically, a politician. This is where you see this is where you get the rational, right? In a rational system and in some kind of democracy or republic, you would think the politicians would act, they're there to act in the best of the people. Mm-hmm. But you have that conflict because you find a lot, they act in the benefit of themselves. And so when you're voting for somebody, right, you have to think of the game theory of all that. Is this person, what's their true incentive, things like that. So you have players, you have what is a game. And the most popular game, example of a game in game theory, when people do talk about it or know about it all, it's called the prisoner's dilemma. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the game?
I think it's where you have two people who committed a crime, and then you put them in separate rooms, and you try to pit them against each other. And the most sound strategy is to neither one of them talk, telling each other. But then there could be one of them tells on the other, and they get set free, but the other guy gets a more harsh punishment, and vice versa. Or they both telling each other, and they both get crappy punishments.
Yep. So there's a matrix. Exactly. That's pretty much it. So you and me do some dirt, but with the context, right? And here's a big thing with the prisoner's dilemma game. We don't really know each other, right? Satoshi Nakamoto came out the blue and plucked me off the street, plucked you off the street, and said, I need both of you to go do this for me real quick. Mm-hmm. But we don't know each other. Mm-hmm. So we go do it. We know we did the dirt, right? But then we get caught, like you said. Mm-hmm. And just like an episode of The Wire or Law and Order, every cop show you've ever seen, right? Right. They throw you into a separate room, and the cop's going to come into me and be like, you know you messed up, right? Mm-hmm. She done already told us everything, right? And they play that whole game. Yeah. And so here's the game, right? I can shut up, and if you shut up, we both get 1 year.
Right.
I could shut up, but you don't shut up, and I end up getting 3 years, and you go away for free. Yeah. You get no time. Yeah. But now I get 3 times the amount of time. I'm in there for 3 years. Right. We could both snitch, but we're both going to do 2 years each. Mm-hmm. Right? And then the inverse. I could snitch and you could shut up, and I get to go free, and you get to do the 3 years. And so, yeah, what you said is true. If we both just shut up, right? Mm-hmm. We do a year, but it's 1 year.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the best pick, but that's not game theory. Game theory isn't the best pick. The game theory is what's the best pick thinking about a rational actor in the other room.
Right.
What I have to consider, my first instinct is to shut up, but then two things happen. If I shut up and you don't, I'm doing 3 times the amount, you're walking away, and that's better for you.
Right.
And so if you think I'm going to shut up, you're probably, like, if you know the rules, you're probably going to say something.
Yeah.
And just get away scot-free.
Yeah.
You got no alliances to me. And if I think, no, we talked about it and I trust her, she is going to shut up, well, now it's in my best interest to snitch.
Yeah.
Because I know you're not going to say nothing. I get to go away free. Why should I do a year when I can go away for free?
Right.
Right? So the best pick for me, the best pick for us is for us both to shut up, but I can't trust you're going to shut up. And if I can, why would I shut up? Mm-hmm. So the best interest for me is to snitch.
Right.
And you're doing the exact same game in your head. Mm-hmm. The best interest for you is to snitch. Mm-hmm. So we're both going to do 2 years each. Mm-hmm. It's not the best outcome, but that's the likely probability of what's going to happen, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Game theory.
Right.
Done. So we'll talk to y'all next week.
Wait, what? Wait, but how does that? Okay, so now how does that correlate to like Bitcoin and crypto?
All right, so let's go to Bitcoin, right? What I just mentioned with the prisoner's dilemma is called competitive game theory. Competitive game theory, by definition, is, well, by very loose definition, if you go check out the textbook, it might state the word, but the intent is the same. Competitive game theory is where each player works to maximize their own individual outcome. And there is no ability for the players to make any kind of enforceable agreement. And that's key right there, an enforceable agreement. We might have, Satoshi plucked us up, told us to go do this job. Mm-hmm. So right before we went in to do it, we made an agreement like, look, if we get caught, I ain't going to say nothing. You don't say nothing. They don't know nothing. They don't know who Satoshi is, so we're good, right?
Yeah.
We're going to shut up.
Yep.
So even with that being said, and then we end up in that prisoner's dilemma, I still don't know you. I can't enforce you're not going to say nothing. Right. If you snitch, it's not like you get rewarded for going against our word, right? So that's key in a competitive game situation. There is no enforceable agreement.
Right.
All right? Stop me if I'm like...
No, I'm following.
I'm
following.
So with Bitcoin is a competitive game.
Okay.
All right? This is why you hear everybody say, not your keys, not your coins, run your own node, right? Mm-hmm. Even miners have this very selfish aligned incentive to play. Bitcoin has been built around, and I say Bitcoin, but proof of work systems in general are built around a very specific self-interested rule. It's better for you to just play by the rules because I'm going to play the game. I run my own node, right? And when Bitcoin was designed, I was recently looking through Twitter, and there's somebody who had a misinterpretation of some of Satoshi's early writings, where Satoshi was talking about nodes. Mm-hmm. But while Satoshi was involved in Bitcoin actively, that we know of, whenever they said the word node, they meant mining node. There was no concept of a non-mining node, right? A node is just a mining software piece that doesn't actually run the mining. It just does the checking.
Okay.
Every miner has to check the blockchain. They have to run a node to know the state of the blockchain. But you can check the state of the blockchain without actively mining.
Oh, okay.
But that wasn't a concept because ASICs weren't a thing, mining pools weren't a thing. All these things weren't things yet. So it was pretty much like if you were running a node, why wouldn't you mine? Right. You just do it on your laptop or whatever. He knew one day it would get to a point where you wouldn't be running the thing. But again, the concept of a node that wasn't mining wasn't really a thing. So that was a tangent. You got, if you're running a node
Yep.
or you're a miner, right?
Okay.
Those are the only really two people who matter. There's developers and argument for developers, but if a miner and a node runner are the only people who really matter because they're running their own software.
Okay.
Those people aren't trusting anybody. If I run my own node, I don't trust what you say. I don't look at my phone and look at the price of Bitcoin and say like, oh, that's the price of Bitcoin, or that's how many Bitcoin are in circulation, or this is who just won a block. I don't make any kind of assumptions based off this. I'm just trusting whatever party is issuing this number to me.
Right.
You were just looking at mempool.space.
Right.
Right? We're looking at the public version of mempool.space. I'm trusting somebody else's node
To deliver.
to deliver all of that block height information you just gave.
Okay.
I don't need to trust them. I could run my own node.
Yeah.
I could use mempool space and tie it to my node, and that way I'm looking at their interface, but it's my node it's pulling the data from.
So it's coming from your node's information.
That's all I trust. And when somebody tells me something different,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to think it's garbage.
Right.
That's a lie. And this is where you sort of survey the rest of the nodes, and I start looking at everybody else's and comparing. It's like, well, 51% or more of the other nodes think I am right. I'm right. This is the chain I'm going with.
Yeah.
It's the longest chain. That's what I'm going with.
Yeah.
If I see that less than 51% of other nodes agree with me, then my node changes its mind. Oh, I got some bad information. I'm going to go with the majority there, right? But ultimately, I play by my own rules. So if you cheat, me and 51%, as long as 51% of other of us rational actors all agree, like, no, you changed the rules or you're doing something wrong, we ignore you. That's it, right? That's the game theory of Bitcoin.
Ignore you being don't let the transaction go through?
Yeah, well, it might go through on your end, but it's the network isn't respecting it, so we ignore it, right? And so let's say a miner, there's a lot of talk about 51% attacks in general, but definitely with proof of work networks. So what's the worst case scenario in a 51% attack? The miner can double spend their own tokens. They can't make my transaction change, right? They can't like double spend my tokens. They can't do anything with my tokens because
That's with their own.
just with their own. That's what a double spend. You can only do your own thing.
Okay.
So they can do that. They can try to double spend. And if they control 51% of the network, I'll be like, this doesn't look right, but a majority of rational, what I would consider rational people, what I think are rational people, say you could double spend, so I guess that happened.
Yeah.
Right? The transaction they double spent is what happened. My node won't let a double spend happen, but it'll say, well, I thought Alice paid Ashlee from that Bitcoin, but 51% of the network says Alice paid Bob. So I guess Ashlee never got the money. Bob did. So my node now took that transaction away from you. You got screwed.
Oh.
But it can't say Nate paid Bob because the miner never controlled Nate's signature, his private keys.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the game theory in that is how is that system aligned to prevent that or have the network respond to it in a way that doesn't harm the overall network. And that's sort of how the proof of work modeling works. This is why everybody needs to run their own node so they can verify their own. If you only have two people running nodes, mining or otherwise, then the entire network trusts them. It only takes one of them to have, if they collude, none of us know anything.
Is it likely that a bad actor would have a situation where they're having 51% of
Yes. And that becomes dire. And so, again, if you read the white paper and you start thinking about this is why I keep saying 51%.
Right.
And earlier we defined players as rational actors. Right? So if 51% of the network are non-rational actors, then, all chaos can start to break loose. But this is why the growth, the size of a network really matters. If there are only 5 people involved, right, in mining and running their own nodes, well, that's a very small group of people. right? The game theory still applies, but it's a lot easier for 5 entities to collude than it is for 500 entities to collude,
Right.
than it is for 5,000 entities to collude. And so as long as 51% of the network are rational players, then it doesn't matter that 49% of the network are malicious, non-rational actors.
Right.
It's
the math
irrelevant.
is against them.
Right, because we all run our own nodes.
Right.
Right? So that's how competitive game theory works. I don't care what anybody else is doing. You don't get punished in Bitcoin for cheating. Right? If you're a miner or a participant and you try to double spend, or you try to co-opt the network, or you try to change the rules, or you try to do anything, the network just ignores you. They don't like punish you and say
Yeah.
like, go sit in the corner.
Yeah.
There's no need for it, because by nature, I don't trust anybody else.
But I'm having a hard time understanding when you say it ignores you. Does that mean that they get away with their malicious act?
No, it means the network ignores the malicious act.
So then it's not able to like go through.
So there's only a couple things you can do, right? You could try to do a double spend if you're a miner, right? Or have a miner on your side that's going to allow it to happen. But you only affect you and their transaction, and my node is only going to recognize one of those transactions. Now, if you control 51% of the network, I'll believe the double spended transaction.
Right.
So
But the odds of that are not
to
good.
put it in regular sort of terms, right? If I go to Alice and I want to buy a car from her,
Okay.
I give her, I'm like, here's the money, here's the Bitcoin.
Right.
She gives me the car, right?
Right.
But I control 51% of the network. So once I get the car, I double spend. I take the same Bitcoin I gave her, and I go to Bob and say, hey, Bob, I want to put a down payment on the house in. Here's the Bitcoin. But it's the same Bitcoin I gave to Alice.
Right.
Right? But I control 51% of the network. I've just spent that same Bitcoin twice.
Right.
I've already got the car. Now
Now you're trying to get the house.
your node sees this activity,
Right.
and you're like, whoa, that can't be right. One of those are a bad transaction. If I control 51% of the network, your node is going to be like, well, what does everybody else think?
Right.
Well, 51% of the people think Nate's transaction with Bob is legit. So Alice doesn't get nothing.
Right.
Alice just got screwed.
Right.
Only Alice just got screwed. Right?
Right.
Now, you believed a liar because I co-opted the network.
Right.
If I don't control 51% of the network and try to do that, no node recognizes that. And so even though I try to pay Bob a second time, if his node believed it, which it shouldn't because 51% of the network is honest,
Right.
when I try to spend that money with Bob, Bob's going to reject it. He's not going to give me the deed to the house as a down payment,
would
because
be
he's going to be
like-
like, you already spent that Bitcoin. You don't have it to give to me.
It would be like if you used a credit card or a debit card and it went in and it was like denied.
Right. Except in that situation, we have a third party doing that verification
Right.
for us.
Right.
Game theory is much easier there because you're just trusting Visa or MasterCard or American Express or whoever. Here, there is no third party, so we have to trust the will of the network, the longest chain, right? So I can't do the double spend if I don't control 51%. But even if I do control 51%, again, it's only the people I'm interacting with that are affected.
Right.
I can't go in and say, hey, Ashlee spent X amount of money with Dave. I want Ashlee now to be able to take that same money and spend it with so-and-so, because I can't control your wallet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I just verify transactions. That's all mine does. They don't go in and control everybody's
Right.
independent signatures.
Yeah. Okay.
All right? So that's how a proof of work system works, and that's why there's no punishment. You just get ignored if I'm trying to be that malicious and I don't control 51% of the network. Now, what I can try to do is change the rules so your nodes do respect these other things and allow me to spend it twice, right? So both Alice and Bob get that same amount of money. But again, this is why everybody runs their own node. If I change the rule, how can I change the rule? I can change it, but I now have to co-opt and make every single actor, the merchants, the hodlers, the exchanges, the developers who are running their own nodes, the block explorers, chain analysis. I have to make every single participant run my version of the software.
Right.
This is why there is no universal Bitcoin software necessarily, right? Everybody has to verify their own, and you don't have to update. There's no forced updates, right? So even if I change the rules, all I just did was create a fork. And if I'm the only person living on my fork, sure, I can do whatever I want to, but where's the economic value there? Nobody else is on my fork.
Yeah.
And even if I trick a few people to come over, they will eventually come back when they realize what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. Or you get a true chain split, like you have with ETH and ETH Classic, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. You know, any of the forks that happen. So there is no need to punish. I didn't trust you in the first place. I don't have to punish somebody I didn't trust in the first place.
Right.
I expected you to cheat. That's why I run my own node. That's why when we do a transaction, I look for a confirmation.
Yeah, but that sucks for Alice because she did everything she was supposed to do and still got screwed.
Yeah, but only in the event that I 51% attacked the network.
Yeah.
Now, you might have 51% attacked the network. I could try to double spend Alice, but if you're not on my side because you control the network, Alice still doesn't get screwed. Again, it doesn't change my transactions with her. And for the record, multiple times in Bitcoin's history has usually a mining pool, I think always a mining pool. There's been times where they've hit 51% control of the network.
Oh, wow.
So the pool, now a pool isn't a single entity, right?
Yeah.
It's hundreds or thousands of individual miners contributing to one, so they could all just unplug and go to another pool.
Yeah.
But there's been times when it's 51% control does not instantly mean attack happened. It just means it could happen if whoever had 51%
Decided to.
So if everybody in that pool was like, yeah, we want to double spend, they could.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened.
But also they wouldn't know who each other is, right?
Right. But other than that, yeah. So that's competitive game theory, right? Now, in contrast to that, there are a bunch of different games you could have. One of those games, the other game that's really used inside of any kind of blockchain, permissionless blockchain system, is called competitive game theory.
Right.
Have you heard of that?
I have. Well, isn't that just where you're looking out for your best interest?
Nope.
No.
Nope. There's a key difference there. So with competitive game theory, you have the prisoner's dilemma.
Okay.
The way to think about cooperative game theory is called the stag.
I think you asked me competitive.
Oh, well, cooperative game theory. There's competitive game theory, which you just talked about, prisoner's dilemma. Then there's cooperative game theory.
Okay, well, I don't know the answer, but my guess would be that it's like the benefit of everybody, not just of yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the way to think about that, you have prisoner's dilemma for competitive. You have the stag game for cooperative game theory. And that is, instead of being two prisoners, we're two hunters, right? And we have to eat, right? And feed our families. Now, by default, if we act in a competitive manner, we could each go hunt a rabbit. But rabbits are small, quick, hard to find, and only will feed one family member. All right?
Okay.
So we could do it. It's just not the...
It's like not like efficient. It's not
as efficient. Or you and me could work to... There's stags out there, right? We could go hunt a stag, but you can't get a stag on your own, and I can't get a stag on my own. But together we could get a stag.
Silly question alert. Is a stag like a bigger, like a deer?
Yeah, think of like a deer.
Okay.
Right? So we could go hunt a deer.
Okay.
Now, if you and me go hunt a deer, we can't capture it ourselves alone, but together we can get it, and that will triple the output of food, right?
Right.
Now, here's the thing. Here's that same sort of matrix on snitch, don't snitch, right?
Okay.
We have to have some kind of agreement situation, a cooperation, where it's like, all right, we're going to agree, we're going to work together.
Okay.
Right? Now, here's the game theory of that.
Okay.
We can both work together, hunt a stag, get the stag, and both have more food than the other. neither one of us could hunt the stag, and we both end up with just a rabbit.
Okay.
Or sort of in the opposite boxes here, it just shifts on who's doing it. One of us could hunt the stag, but it's only one of us hunting the stag and get nothing. And the other one decides, I don't want to work with this person. I'm going to go hunt the rabbit, and you walk away with the rabbit. So best scenario is we both hunt a stag, we both get the stag, we both get more. We both just hunt rabbits and get less.
Yeah.
Or we trust each other, but if one of us screws each other, one of us ends up with nothing. The other one at least gets dinner that night, right? So a big difference in competitive game theory and cooperative game theory. With the cooperative, with the stag situation, how do I know, even though we agreed, just like we both agreed not to snitch,
Right.
how do I know you're not going to screw me halfway through? And there's usually, the big difference here is there's some kind of enforceable agreement between us, right? Maybe it's a contract. Look, we're going to agree to go do this. If you go hunt the rabbit instead of the stag, I get the rabbit. And I have the state will come in and enforce that for me. We were supposed to go hunt a stag. She hunted a rabbit. There's her rabbit. The state will come take the rabbit from you and give it to me. Think of an average lawsuit, right? That's a big difference. So now we're both incentivized to cooperate, because if we cheat, we get punished. Right? This is more proof of stake. Right? Think of how staking works. You have to agree. Let's take the Ethereum model of proof of stake, because there's a lot of different flavors, just like there's a lot of different flavors of proof of work. But in general, let's take the Ethereum just for context.
Okay.
Ethereum has basically a smart contract.
Right.
Right?
And so that would be like the enforceable.
Except it's not enforced by law, it's enforced by code.
Right. Okay.
And that I'm going to put in 32 ETH. The gain of that is I'm going to, for putting in 32 ETH, I get to be selected in the lottery. Every block is a lottery, right? And I might win a lottery. I'll get to validate the block, and for doing so, I'll get some of the fees from the block. Plus, I'll earn whatever block reward or whatever, right? But if I cheat, when it's my turn, if I'm not available, or I try to cheat, I try to do a whole bunch of different variations of whatever the cheating is, part of my stake will get slashed. I'll get punished, right? It's not like Bitcoin where if I cheat, I just get ignored. I get punished for it because I entered into an agreement up front. Hey, I want to play this lottery, and if I win, I will do this. And if I don't, here's my punishment, right? So now you have this whole cooperative game theory. So now you have this whole cooperative game theory. Bitcoin is like, I don't trust none of y'all. I'm doing my own thing. Proof of stake, Ethereum is more like, you know what? I think we all should try to work together. But in the event we can't work together and you cheat, you get punished. Make sense?
Yeah.
Now, that's a very high level of it all.
Yeah.
The game theory goes way more complex. Even in that proof of stake that's cooperative, that piece is cooperative. You're still playing in a grander competitive theory because every validator still sort of have their own self-aligned incentives in there. So you could have game theory when you really start to dig into something like Ethereum. You're looking at game theory inside of game theory. And then when you're looking at the dApps built on top of Ethereum, you're looking at game theory built inside of game theory built inside of different, and they're all different games that are getting played. And so the challenge of all of this and why game theory is important, not just for looking at the basis of like a layer one protocol, you have to be looking at a dApp. If you're looking at a DeFi network or something, you got to look at how their game theory applies. How does that align to the game theory of whatever they're built on top of? How does that align on top of the consensus game theory that's aligned. So it
Wow,
gets
it's like
really,
tons
really
of layers.
complex.
Yeah.
Right. So somebody might be simple to say, it's like, well, it's like the underwear gnome from South Park. It was one of my favorite. Are you familiar with them?
No, but it's really funny.
Just in real short, right? There's these little gnomes going around stealing all the kids' underwear. And so the gang goes and tries to find them. They track them down.
Okay.
Right? And they pin they get to one of the gnomes and they're like, what are you doing? He's like, oh man, we're collecting underwear. And he's like, why? And he's like, well, it's easy. Phase 1,
Yeah.
collect underwear.
Yeah.
Phase 3, profit.
Yeah.
Duh. And he's like, well, what's phase 2?
Yeah.
Hey, Bob,
Yeah.
what's phase 2? He's like, phase 2? Phase 1, collect underwear.
Yeah.
Phase 3, profit.
Yeah.
Right? They skip. It sounds good,
Yeah.
but you've skipped a whole key factor. And this is what a lot of these protocols do. Whether you're layer 1, layer 2, apps, dApps, app chains,
Yeah.
a lot of them, it's why everything in crypto is a scam. That's not true. Everything in crypto, but most things in crypto aren't well thought through.
Yeah.
Because they don't think through the full game theory. They have good incentives,
They
or
skip
good.
step two, so
they
to
have
say.
good intentions.
Yeah.
But a lot of them skip step 2, which is really analyzing this game theory piece. And so, like the last episode we had, what's that, 15, where we talked about tokenomics.
Right.
The tokenomics go wrong really quick if you're not fully thinking out game theory. And it's not as simple as just like in the prisoner's dilemma thing.
Yeah.
Right? You would think like just everybody shuts up. Yeah, but what if they don't shut up?
Right.
Well, they should shut up. Yeah, but what if they don't?
Yeah.
Or with Ethereum proof of stake, it's like everybody works together. What if they don't?
Right.
Well, you slash them. This is a problem with proof of stake when it first, not Ethereum's per se, just the idea of proof of
Right,
stake when
right,
it
right.
came out. Slashing wasn't part of the model. It was like, oh, instead of spending energy, you could put in a stake. And then somebody asked that question. Like, well, what happens if somebody cheats?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they won't cheat. Why would they cheat, man? Economic incentives, man. It's like, yeah, but what if they do?
Yeah.
Oh. And so they had to introduce slashing, right? And the same thing, Ethereum is a good example. Like, I think proof of stake as a consensus mechanism has some promise. The reason I don't put 100% in on that, all this is not financial advice stuff, but because it gets more complex. The same thing happens when you think about game theory. When you build the base layer of Ethereum, cool, but when you have a dApp, you have that minor extractable value
Right.
piece.
Right.
That wasn't a consideration.
It's like a wild card.
And Ethereum had already been out for about 2 years before somebody even realized
Right.
MEV was a thing.
Yeah.
And then now it's like built onto it, but it's not part of the native protocol. There's these extra things that weren't thought of. This is all game theoretic thinking, but it wasn't thought of initially. And so you're still sort of building out and building up. And the more complex of a system, as you start to evaluate different projects, for all the Ethereum killers out there, it's like, well, to be an Ethereum killer, it means you had to make a different design decision.
Right. A different game theory.
Right.
Right?
Well, yes, you have to think of what the different game theory is, except you don't. You just think maybe people hate fees. Fees should be cheaper. We got cheap fees.
Yeah,
but why do you have expensive fees? There's a reason fees get expensive.
Yeah.
And to just say, I'm going to force my fees to be cheaper, you're ignoring the game theory of why fees are expensive in the first place.
Right.
And Ethereum suffered from this. Bitcoin had big fees in the 2017 bull run. And even Vitalik was like, any network that has fees over 15 cents, like you're a failed project. And 2 years later,
now.
yeah, they had projects that were running $1,000 fees
Yeah.
at points with NFT mints. Just because the game theory sounds good,
Yeah.
but where's the game theory
Right.
behind it? And so now you have to figure out a more complex system to address those holes, or you have to figure out something different with the game theory to keep fees low and allow a simplistic model.
Yeah.
And it gets really complex really, really quick. but people don't like complex. They like the simple answer.
Right.
Cheap fees.
Right.
20,000 transactions per second.
Right.
All right, at what cost?
Yeah.
Right? That's game theory.
Very interesting.
And that's pretty much the whole thing of game theory. Where'd I lose you?
Oh boy, where did you lose me? Well, I back to the stag game and hunters and proof of stake and the cheating. I don't know why. I was just curious to know, like, what is something that they like? How could it be? Like, what is an example of cheating in that scenario?
In either scenario,
Well, and specifically to I think
with like
we
the
could use like
stag with the
Ethereum or
competitive.
something. Yeah.
So there's the nothing at stake problem. So with Bitcoin, just as an example,
Okay.
with a proof of work system, you have to spend an external resource, right?
Yep.
In order to obtain the native token,
Right.
the native coin.
In this case,
That-
like energy, right? Is it?
Well, you
you're
have to
getting
spend
it?
energy
Okay.
to get Monero. This is how
Okay.
Monero works too, right?
Okay.
It requires a different energy resourcing module, but basically you're spending energy, and for rewarding you for spending that energy, you'll get some Monero tokens. But it doesn't matter if you hold all the Monero in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you no extra power in how the consensus of the network works.
Okay.
I could have all the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
There's 18 something million Bitcoin in circulation. I can get my hands on all of them, all the lost ones, all of them. I have all the Bitcoin.
Right.
It doesn't allow me any extra favor in the Bitcoin network
Because of the nodes, is that?
because of the energy expenditure,
Oh, okay.
right? It uses an external resource. Ethereum, on the other hand, proof of stake, they require you to obtain the native coin. Well, how do you obtain it? Now, in Ethereum's example, if you're going to use a proof of stake model, I think they're one of the better ways to do it, which is they started as a proof of work mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So you went out and had to spend the energy to accumulate tokens.
Right.
Now that the accumulation phase has ended, they shifted to proof of stake, and then you took your tokens you accumulated and you could put them in. But from this point forward, the only way to accumulate tokens is to buy them
Right.
or earn them, right?
Right.
But you can't mine them.
Right.
So it's not as fair of a distribution anymore. The question is, does it need to be as fair of a distribution? The network's been out for, 8 years or so. So the nothing at stake problem that I started this with, this is one of the ways you can cheat, is if I can just buy the tokens with some external currency, I just buy the tokens, I can put them up. I'm using the tokens they are the security model, right? And so where did I get the tokens are made up out of the system.
Okay.
So the thing that's made up out of the system, I'm using to enforce the system. So I invented this system out of nothing, and out of that nothingness, I have a coin.
Yeah.
And with that coin, I can now use that to enforce the system. I'm using nothing to enforce nothing.
Right.
Right? Nothing at stake.
Yeah.
And that becomes an issue. That's an attack vector if it's not addressed.
Would that be? I'm just trying to follow here. Would that be like if you kind of made your own
Well, yeah, this is what a pre-mine is. This is what pretty much why people are 99% of projects. Because if I'm going to start Natecoin today,
Right.
I build my protocol, I need some initial tokens, I pre-mine them, I invent them out of thin air.
Right.
Or then I say, well, I'm the development team, so I get 40% of the token supply.
Right.
And then I'm going to issue, or 50%, or however much percent.
Right.
The developers get 40%, the VCs get 30%, and then the rest go to whoever.
Yeah.
Right? What did it take to create all those tokens? Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing's at stake.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then speculation drives up price. But if I'm cheating, what did it cost me to cheat the system if I got all the tokens for free up front?
Right.
It cost me nothing.
Nothing, yeah. Because you just delegated them.
Right. So how do you get if you're going to do a staking system, how are you going to take your tokens and assign some kind of base value? Now remember, I don't believe in intrinsic value as a equator of what price or something value should be. But
what if instead of delegating the coins, if like some project was like, okay, everyone has to buy in, even me as the person who's like making this.
Right. That could be one thing. You have to run through the game theory of that.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
For you, there might be a work, but how would a rational actor in that whole scenario, what's the best incentive for a rational actor who's only looking to benefit economically from that? How could they exploit it? Playing by the rules, how could they exploit it and screw you, another user, right?
Are there projects out there like that are like actually like considering like the game theory? Or
I think tons of projects consider the game theory. I just think most projects suck at it.
Okay.
Because you're either... So computer theory is like a very strong economic thing if you're a really big economist who specializes in it, and it's deep in computer science if you're like a computer science engineer, not a coder. I'm not saying coders don't get game theory, but if you have somebody who just understands how to work Python or Rust, some computer language, just because you can write code doesn't mean you get game theory. It's a much deeper level of computer science than you are as a coder or even a lot of times a programmer. It gets into engineering tasks. And, it's easy, like me. I'm not saying I can think out, I know the answer, I can look at every single system. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a deep economist. So I know very base level game theory. So if I'm going to design a system, I'm trusting my knowledge of the game theory. And if it's not that deep, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of projects run into a problem. They don't know what they don't know. They're like, oh, yeah. Phase 1, collect underwear. Phase 3, profit.
Yeah.
Duh.
That makes sense.
That's just sort of where it is and what it is. Anything else?
No, I think that's all my questions on this so far. I'm like surprising myself that I'm following so well.
All right, well, let's test that. What is game theory?
Game theory is the strategies that players use to make decisions in a rational thinking situation.
Sure.
No, was it wrong?
Yeah, that's pretty right. I mean, you were pretty right to begin with.
Yeah.
The key thing I would think you're still missing on both ends is you have to take into consideration how other players will act. It's not just your own decision, right? It's not like what works best for me. Now, the key to good game theory thinking in every model of game theory that I'm aware of is being able to expertly put yourself in somebody else's shoe. I know this is best for me, but after you finish rationalizing, like the prisoner's dilemma, you rationalize, well, if we just both shut up, and if we shut up, and if I shut up, so it's best to shut up. So now you've just put your logic on every other player.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You have to take that extra step.
So the strategy of knowing how other rational players will react in any situation?
Yep.
In a given situation?
That's, I think, is a good summary of game theory.
Okay.
Yep. And then your security person comes in and says, yeah, but what if they're not an irrational player? What if you're a nation state who just wants to attack the network?
Okay, so that actually is I forgot that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. Yeah, what happens if, like, someone, because there's a lot of irrational people. So,
But
what happens?
I think the earlier example I brought up of MEV, particularly with ETH, I think that's not a nation state, but there are things that are just going to be unforeseeable, right? And so how do you address that model? And I think it's still a huge debate in in any kind of network that has economic activity. Bitcoin doesn't really have too big of a MEV problem because it only does base layer money. Monero doesn't have too big of a MEV problem because it only does base layer money, right? There's not a lot of areas to extract. It's just party A sent money to party B. Done.
Yeah.
There's no MEV to pull from that. But once you get more complex, any system that does something more complex than that, you start to see MEV. And that was an unforeseen thing, just like an HSA attack. So now it becomes, can you make the adjustments to the protocol? Here's a new scenario. Have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
No.
All right. Me neither, for the record. Me neither. But that's part of like a Dungeons and Dragons thing. The game master will throw a different equation into the mix.
Yeah.
You think you got it all figured out, and they're like, yeah, but now it's raining meteors.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When that happens, how do you adjust that strategic thinking?
Yeah.
And then how do you apply those to the rule set? So especially in a decentralized system, right?
Yeah.
Without a third-party verifier,
Right.
how do you change the protocol rules to address that vector?
Yeah.
Right? Because now that's just another, now it's a rational, even an irrational actor become a rational actor once you understand once you've lived in their shoes
Yeah.
and start to understand their motives.
Yeah.
Now you can apply that and change the protocol to address that if possible, or change something
Yeah.
in it to make it possible, or you have sort of a failed protocol. Right?
Yeah.
So it can get deep, and there's way more deep conversations. Like I said, you have games inside of games inside of games.
Yeah.
How does a protocol like Aave, who does lending,
Yeah.
they have to take game theory into consideration for themselves, but then they can't just base it off of a typical lending borrower, because they have to also think about the incentives with the Ethereum protocol or the layer 2 they're sitting on. I don't have a strong case against it. I just have this gut feeling. I have a problem with liquid staking. The idea of staking, right, is to force a participant to remove the economic value of their native token or coin and put it into this system to help validate the system. Right? The cost of me doing it with a proof of work system is I have to find energy and expend resources to exert energy into the system to participate.
Right.
The cost of a proof of stake is I have to remove my economic value, right? The economic opportunity cost, I should say. I have to remove the economic opportunity cost and lock that into this system.
Right.
And in exchange for that, I get a chance to validate blocks. I can make additional economic value because you're getting an incentive with the APR and all that. With liquid staking, that now allows me to put a stake into it, be able to participate, but now I can treat my receipt, right, that staking receipt, I still get the economic incentive.
Yeah.
I feel like, without having any, I'm still thinking through and trying to find people to debate with me on this, so hit me up on Twitter or something if you want to. I'm very open to it. You've removed that economic stake. Now I'm back to the nothing at stake problem.
Yeah.
Because, so what? I get slashed. I got my receipt. As long as there's somebody out there I can sell my receipt to for the same face value,
Right.
what have I lost?
Right. Right. I completely agree.
So I think that's a hole that's not being seriously addressed that I know of in any proof of stake system. This is not an Ethereum, any proof of stake system. I think that's something that has to be addressed, or at least I hope it gets explained to me in a way where I understand the way. And that way I can show everybody else, no, I used to think that same silliness, right? So yeah, these are all, but that's a game theoretic thing.
Yeah.
Again, game theory, there's nothing you're touching in this system, no matter what you're building or doing, that isn't part of game theory. If you're not thinking about game theory, even at its highest form level, you're not thinking about it right.
Are there many more different types of game theory?
There's tons.
Oh, because it's
tons
so
of games.
interesting to me.
So we'll have it. we'll get into a little bit of it. We're sort of at our time, but we do have the Block Note show on YouTube. Comes out usually a week after this show, but we usually carry on the conversation. So check out Block Notes on YouTube. But also, if you go check out theblocument.com, we'll have resources about this. Yale has this cool free course that as like a video podcast. Excuse me. I know it's on like Apple Podcasts and stuff, so I'll put a link to that on the site. It's a full semester course on game theory, where they walk through, again, not into the math aspects. A lot of times there'll be a little math and that'll scare people off. You'll start to see like SI to the R power and be like, I'm done.
No, thank you.
Right. You can understand a lot about game theory without getting into the math of game theory. And Yale has a really cool course that you can audit for free online. Cool. So we'll have that to learn about game theory. Then, so check out theblocument.com. And where else are we?
We are on Facebook. We are on TikTok. We are on Apple, Android, Spotify, all the places.
We're on all the places at The Blocument. So check out today's show. Check out past shows, especially about like staking and things like that, so you can get a better understanding. And other than that, I will see you on the other side during Block Notes, and we'll check all of you out in 2 weeks.
Yep.
All right. Come for the riches.
Stay for the revolution.
All right. Peace.
Peace.